She was only 7 years old when she pushed open the door of a cabin that hadn't been touched in 37 years, her tiny hands frozen blue, her lips unable to form words, collapsing into a room that would save her life and uncover a secret that had been waiting decades for exactly the right lost soul to find it. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The mountains of Montana don't forgive mistakes. Emma Kane knew this even at 7 years old. She'd learned it the hard way, the kind of way that carves lessons into your bones deeper than any classroom ever could. Her parents had taught her that 2 years ago when they were still alive, before the black ice on Route 12 took them from her in a spinning crash that left her an orphan and her grandmother a guardian she never expected to become. Now, Emma lived in a small house on the edge of Timber Ridge, a town so small it had one traffic light that only turned red when the volunteer fire department needed to cross Main Street. The house was old, the kind with floors that creaked secrets and windows that rattled when the wind came down from the peaks. But it was warm, and it was hers and her grandmother's. Marie Kane was 68 years old with hands like weathered leather and a heart that had already buried a husband, a son, and a daughter-in-law. She'd spent most of her life working at the town's only diner, serving coffee and eggs to loggers and truckers who passed through on their way to somewhere bigger, somewhere that mattered. But Timber Ridge mattered to Marie. It was home. And now, against all odds and every aching joint in her body, she was raising a little girl who barely spoke anymore. Emma hadn't said more than a few words at a time since the accident. The therapist in Missoula, an hour's drive away, said it was trauma, that she'd speak again when she was ready. Marie didn't push. She just made sure Emma had clean clothes, hot meals, and a bed with enough blankets to keep the cold out. Love, she figured, didn't need a lot of words. December arrived that year like it always did in Montana, fast and unforgiving. The first snow came on the 8th, covering everything in a silence so complete you could hear your own heartbeat. By the 15th, the drifts were waist-high. By the 20th, the town had hunkered down, waiting for Christmas to pass, so winter could get on with the serious work of freezing everything solid until March. Marie had a tradition. Every year before Christmas, she baked pies, apple, pumpkin, and cherry, and delivered them to the folks on the outskirts who didn't make it to town much. Old Man Hendricks up on Miller's Pass, the widow Carol who lived near the frozen creek, the Alvarez family whose youngest boy had been born with a heart condition and couldn't handle the altitude well. It wasn't charity, it was neighborly. And in a place like Timber Ridge, being neighborly was the difference between surviving winter and disappearing into it. On the morning of December 22nd, Marie woke Emma before dawn. The sky outside was still black, stars scattered like broken glass across velvet. "Come on, sweet pea," Marie said gently, brushing hair from Emma's face. "We've got deliveries to make." Emma didn't complain. She never did. She just dressed in layers, thermal underwear, jeans, 2 sweaters, her winter coat that was slightly too big, boots that Marie had stuffed with extra socks, a knit hat and mittens connected by a string through her sleeves so she wouldn't lose them. Marie loaded the pies into the back of her old pickup truck, a 1989 Ford that had seen better decades but still ran when you coaxed it right. The heater worked about half the time. Today was one of the good days. They drove out as the sun began creeping over the mountains, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. Emma sat in the passenger seat, her small hands folded in her lap, watching the world pass by in silence. Marie hummed an old hymn, off-key but warm. The road was empty. It always was this far out. They made their first stop at Hendrick's place. The old man came to the door in a bathrobe and boots, grinning when he saw the pie. "Marie, you're gonna make me fat," he said. But he took it anyway, pressing a $20 bill into her hand that she tried to refuse. "For the girl," he insisted, nodding at Emma. "Get her something nice." The second stop was the widow Carol, who cried when she opened the door, not from sadness, but from the kind of loneliness that only the holidays make visible. She hugged Marie too long and gave Emma a candy cane that had probably been sitting in a drawer since last Christmas. Emma took it with a small nod of thanks. The third stop was the Alvarez family. They lived the farthest out, almost 40 minutes up a winding mountain road that barely qualified as paved. The snow was thicker here, the trees pressed close like they were trying to keep secrets. Maria Alvarez answered the door with her baby on her hip and gratitude in her eyes. She invited them in for coffee, but Marie declined politely. "Storm's coming," she said, glancing at the sky. "We should head back." Maria nodded. She'd lived here long enough to know. You didn't ignore the sky in December. They were halfway back to town when the world turned white. It didn't happen slowly. One moment, the road was visible, winding through the pines. The next, the air itself became snow. Thick, blinding, furious. The kind of storm that the old-timers called a whiteout. The kind that erased the line between earth and sky. The kind that swallowed people whole. Marie gripped the wheel tighter, leaning forward, trying to see past the hood of the truck. "It's okay," she said, more to herself than to Emma. "We just take it slow." But the road had other plans. The truck hit a patch of ice hidden beneath fresh snow, and suddenly they were sliding. Marie yanked the wheel, overcorrected, and the truck spun once, twice, before slamming sideways into a snowbank. The impact was violent but muffled, like the world had wrapped them in cotton before punching them in the chest. Silence. Steam hissed from under the hood. The engine ticked softly, dying. Marie gasped, her hands still locked on the wheel, her chest tight. She turned to Emma, fear sharp in her eyes. "You okay, baby?" Emma nodded, eyes wide, but she didn't cry. Marie tried the ignition. Nothing. Tried again. The engine coughed and died. She reached for her phone. No signal. Of course not. They were too far out, too deep in the mountains. She looked around, trying to get her bearings, but the snow was too thick. She couldn't see 10 feet in any direction. Her breathing quickened. Pain shot through her shoulder where the seatbelt had caught her, sharp and hot. She pressed her hand against it and felt something wrong. Something shifted, maybe dislocated, maybe broken. Panic tried to claw its way up her throat, but she forced it down. She had to think. "Emma," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "Listen to me very carefully." Emma turned to her, those big brown eyes so calm it almost broke Marie's heart. "We're stuck. I can't drive, and I'm hurt." Marie swallowed hard. "I need you to walk toward the tree line, follow it downhill. Eventually you'll hit the main road, flag down a car, get help." Emma shook her head, small and stubborn. "Baby, please," Marie's voice cracked. "I can't move, but you can. You're small, you're strong, you can do this." Emma stared at her grandmother for a long moment. Then, slowly, she unbuckled her seatbelt. She leaned over and kissed Marie's cheek, something she hadn't done since her parents died. And then, without a word, she opened the truck door and stepped out into the storm. The cold hit her like a fist. Emma gasped, the air so sharp it hurt her lungs. Snow immediately clung to her coat, her hat, her eyelashes. She couldn't see the truck once she took 5 steps away from it. The world was just white noise and freezing wind. She remembered her father's voice, a memory so faint it felt like a dream. "If you ever get lost, Emma, find the trees. Follow them downhill. Water always flows down and people build near water." She walked. Every step was a battle. The snow came up to her knees, sometimes her waist. Her legs burned. Her face went numb. She pulled her scarf up over her nose and mouth, breathing into the fabric to keep the ice from forming in her throat. Time stopped meaning anything. Was it minutes? Hours? She didn't know. She fell twice. The second time, she wasn't sure she could get back up. Her body felt so heavy, so tired. The cold was almost warm now, which some part of her brain whispered was bad, was dangerous. She thought about her grandmother in the truck. She thought about her parents. She thought about how quiet it was, like the whole world had gone to sleep. Then, through the swirling white, she saw something dark, a shape, solid. She stumbled toward it, her legs barely obeying her anymore. As she got closer, the shape took form. A building. Small, made of stone and dark wood. A cabin. It sat nestled against a grove of pine trees, almost hidden, like it had been placed there by someone who didn't want to be found. Emma reached the door, her mittened hands barely able to grip the handle. She expected it to be locked. She expected to collapse on the porch and freeze, but when she pulled, the door opened. She fell inside and the door swung shut behind her, muffling the storm to a distant howl. The cabin was dark, silent, and impossibly it didn't feel abandoned. It felt like it had been waiting. Emma lay on the floor for a long time, too exhausted to move, too cold to think. Her breath came in shallow gasps. Snow melted off her coat, forming small puddles on the wooden floor. Slowly, painfully, she pushed herself up to her hands and knees, then to her feet. The cabin was small, just one main room with a fireplace, a bed, a table, and a kitchenette. But everything was intact. Covered in dust, yes, but whole. Furniture that hadn't rotted, windows that weren't broken, a ceiling that didn't leak. It was like someone had walked out one day and never came back, but left everything exactly as it was. Emma's eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through the frost-covered windows. She saw a kerosene lamp on the table, matches beside it. Her cold fingers fumbled with the matchbox, dropping 3 before she managed to strike 1. The flame caught, and warm light bloomed in the cabin. She held the lamp up, looking around properly now. There were shelves lined with old canned goods, their labels faded but still readable. Peaches, soup, beans. A basket near the fireplace held split logs, dry and ready. On the wall, a calendar hung frozen in time. December 1987, 37 years ago. Emma didn't understand what that meant, not fully, but she understood she'd found shelter, and shelter meant survival. She set the lamp down and moved to the fireplace. There was kindling in a tin box, newspaper so old it crumbled when she touched it. But beneath it, she found better tinder, small sticks and dried pine cones. She arranged them the way her grandfather had taught her once, back when he was still alive and they'd gone camping. She struck another match. The flame caught, hesitated, then spread. Within minutes, a real fire crackled to life. Heat, blessed, beautiful heat. Emma pulled off her wet mittens and held her hands toward the flames. Feeling returned to her fingers in painful tingles. She took off her hat, her coat, her boots, laying them near the fire to dry. Underneath, her clothes were damp but not soaked. She'd been lucky, or something more than lucky. She found blankets on the bed, thick wool ones that smelled like mothballs and thyme. She wrapped herself in 2 of them and sat as close to the fire as she dared. For the first time since leaving the truck, she let herself feel the fear. It came in waves, shaking her small body, but she didn't cry. She'd forgotten how. Instead, she looked around the cabin more carefully. There were photographs on the walls, black and white. Some color ones faded to strange oranges and blues. They all showed the same woman. She was alone in every picture. Young, maybe in her 30s, with long dark hair and a smile that looked both sad and peaceful at the same time. In one photo, she stood in front of this very cabin, holding a paintbrush. In another, she sat at the table with books spread around her. In another, she was in a wheelchair, her legs covered with a blanket, but her eyes still bright. Emma stared at that last photo for a long time. Who was she? Why was she alone? And why did this cabin feel like it had been left behind on purpose? On the bedside table, barely visible beneath a layer of dust, sat a leather-bound book. Emma reached for it, her fingers leaving trails in the dust. The leather was soft, well worn. She opened it carefully. The first page had one line written in elegant cursive. The Journal of Sarah Mitchell. If you're reading this, then perhaps you needed to find this place as much as I needed to leave it behind. Emma couldn't read all the words. She was only 7 and some of the writing was too complicated, but she understood enough. This was a diary, and it belonged to the woman in the photographs, Sarah. She turned the page and read slowly, sounding out words she didn't know. January 5th, 1985. The doctors say I have 2 years, maybe less. They said it with such clinical detachment, like they were telling me the weather forecast. Degenerative muscular disease, no cure. Progressive loss of mobility. I asked if it would hurt. They said eventually, everything hurts. Emma's finger traced the words. She knew what death was. She knew it too well. She kept reading, skipping ahead, finding passages she could understand. March 12th, 1985. I've decided. I'm not going to waste away in a hospital or become a burden to my family. I'm going to build a cabin, somewhere remote, somewhere beautiful. I'm going to spend whatever time I have left doing what I love, painting, writing, being. August 2nd, 1985. The cabin is finished. It's perfect, small but perfect. I can see the mountains from the window. At night, the stars are so bright they look like they're close enough to touch. I'm happier here than I've been in years. Isn't that strange? Dying and finally happy. Emma closed the journal, her throat tight. She looked around the cabin again, understanding now. This wasn't just a shelter. It was a home, Sarah's home, a place she'd built to die in peace. But where was Sarah now? Emma stood, still wrapped in blankets, and explored further. Behind the bed, she noticed a door she'd missed before. It was small, painted the same color as the wall, easy to overlook. She tried the handle. Locked. She looked around for a key, checked the table, the shelves, the mantel above the fireplace. Nothing. Then, on impulse, she pulled one of the books from the shelf. It was a children's book, Where the Wild Things Are. As she lifted it, something fell out from between the pages. A key, small and brass. Her heart beat faster. She took the key to the door and slid it into the lock. It turned with a soft click. The door opened into a smaller room, and Emma gasped. It was an art studio. Easels stood in the corners, canvases stacked against the walls. A desk sat beneath a window, covered in papers, pencils, brushes, and jars of dried paint. And everywhere, there were drawings. Watercolor paintings of forest animals, deer, rabbits, foxes, birds, sketches of the mountains, illustrations that looked like they belonged in the storybooks her mother used to read to her. Emma walked slowly into the room, her eyes wide with wonder. On the main desk in the center sat a stack of papers bound with a ribbon. The top page had a title written in beautiful calligraphy, The Girl Who Wasn't Lost. She untied the ribbon with trembling fingers and looked at the first illustration. It showed a little girl, small and alone, walking through a snowstorm. The next page showed her finding a cabin. The next, the cabin glowing with warm light, protecting her. Emma's breath caught. She turned the pages faster now, seeing the story unfold. The girl in the drawings explored the cabin, found food and warmth, discovered the journal of the woman who'd lived there, and slowly, page by page, the girl began to heal, not from cold, but from something deeper, from loneliness, from grief. The final illustration showed the girl leaving the cabin, but she wasn't alone anymore. She carried something with her, a book, a light, a purpose. Emma sat down hard on the floor, the manuscript in her lap. This book, this story, it was about her. But it couldn't be. It had been created decades ago, before she was even born, before her parents died, before she ended up lost in a storm, finding this exact cabin. How was that possible? She looked up at the walls, at Sarah's paintings, at the frozen moment in time this room represented. And for the first time since the accident that took her parents, Emma felt something crack open in her chest. Not pain, something else, something that felt like recognition. Like she was meant to be here, like this cabin, this story, this woman named Sarah who died alone in the mountains, had been waiting 37 years for a little girl who needed to find her. Emma pulled the blankets tighter around herself and leaned against the desk. Outside, the storm still raged. Inside, the fire crackled softly, and in her hands she held a story that shouldn't exist but did. A story about a girl who got lost and found exactly what she needed. She didn't know how long she'd be trapped here, didn't know if anyone would find her, didn't know if her grandmother was okay. But for the first time in 2 years, Emma didn't feel alone. The cabin held her like a secret, and somewhere in the quiet, She felt Sarah's presence, like a whisper in the walls, saying, "You're safe now. I built this for you." Emma closed her eyes, exhausted beyond measure, and let sleep take her. Tomorrow, she would explore more. Tomorrow, she would read the rest of Sarah's journal. Tomorrow, she would try to understand how a dead woman's final creation had predicted her arrival. But tonight, she just needed to rest. The cabin kept watch. The fire burned steady, and in the art studio of a woman who'd faced death with grace, a 7-year-old girl who'd forgotten how to speak finally found a place where silence didn't feel like drowning. The snow outside piled higher, burying the cabin deeper, sealing it off from the world. But inside, something impossible was happening. Two lost souls, separated by decades, were meeting in the space between grief and hope. And the story was only beginning. Emma woke to light streaming through the frost-covered windows, turning the cabin into a cathedral of pale gold. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory crashed back. The truck, the storm, her grandmother, the impossible walk through the blizzard, and this place, this cabin that had been waiting. She sat up slowly, her body aching in ways she'd never felt before. Every muscle screamed. Her fingers were stiff, her toes tingled with the ghost of frostbite that had almost claimed them. But she was alive. The fire had burned down to embers, but the cabin still held warmth like a held breath. Emma stood on shaky legs and moved to the window. She used her sleeve to wipe away the condensation and ice. What she saw made her stomach drop. Snow. Everywhere. The drifts had piled so high during the night that they reached halfway up the cabin walls. The door, she realized with creeping dread, was completely buried. She was trapped. Panic fluttered in her chest like a bird against glass. She ran to the door and tried to push it open. It didn't budge, not even an inch. The weight of the snow on the other side was immovable, absolute. She pushed harder, her small shoulder slamming against the wood until it hurt. Nothing. She stepped back, breathing hard, her mind racing. Her grandmother was still out there, still in the truck. Was she okay? Had someone found her? Emma felt tears prick her eyes, hot and angry. She'd left Marie alone. She'd walked away. What if... No, she couldn't think like that. She had to believe someone had found the truck. The sheriff, a plow driver, someone. Marie was tough. She'd survived worse. She had to be okay. Emma forced herself to breathe slowly, the way her mother used to teach her when the nightmares came. In through the nose, out through the mouth, count to 4. Again. She was safe here. The cabin had food, water from melted snow, warmth and shelter. She just had to wait. Someone would come looking, eventually. She turned back to the room, seeing it more clearly in the daylight. The dust was thick on everything, undisturbed except where her feet had tracked through it last night. Cobwebs hung in the corners, delicate and ancient. But there were no signs of animals, no droppings, no nests. It was like the cabin had sealed itself off from nature, preserving itself for this exact moment. Her eyes fell on the leather journal still sitting on the bedside table. Sarah's journal. Emma picked it up carefully, carried it to the chair near the fireplace, and curled up with one of the wool blankets wrapped around her shoulders. She opened to where she'd stopped reading last night and continued. November 15th, 1985. The snow came early this year. I'm glad. It makes everything quiet, peaceful. My legs don't work as well anymore. I need the wheelchair most days now, but I don't mind. I've learned to see beauty in stillness. The way the light catches the icicles hanging from the roof. The way the wind sounds like breathing through the pines. I'm not afraid anymore. Death is just another season, and I'm learning to welcome it like winter welcomes snow. Emma read slowly, her finger following the elegant cursive. Some words she had to guess at, but Sarah's meaning came through clear and strong. She was sick. She was dying. But she wasn't sad. Not really. She'd made peace with it in a way that Emma, even at 7, found both beautiful and heartbreaking. January 3rd, 1986. I've started my final book. I don't know if anyone will ever see it, but that doesn't matter. I'm writing it for the child I never had. The child I might have had in another life. I'm calling her the girl who wasn't lost. She's small and brave and finds her way to a magical cabin in the woods when everything else falls apart. The cabin protects her, heals her, gives her what she needs to face the world again. I think maybe I'm writing about the child I used to be, the one who needed saving and never got it. Maybe if I create her on paper, I can finally let her rest. Emma's throat tightened. She looked toward the art studio where that very book sat waiting. Sarah had written it 38 years ago, had painted every illustration, had poured her dying energy into creating something for a child who didn't exist yet. For her. Emma kept reading, turning pages carefully, watching Sarah's handwriting change over time. Some entries were shaky, written on bad days when her hands barely cooperated. Others were strong and clear. She read about Sarah's past, about growing up in Seattle, about her parents who never understood her need to create, about the man she'd almost married, Thomas, who'd proposed with a ring and promises. March 27, 1986. Thomas came to see me yesterday. I don't know how he found me. I thought I'd hidden myself well enough. He looked the same, older around the eyes maybe, but the same. He cried when he saw me in the wheelchair, asked me to come home, to let him take care of me. I told him no. He got angry, said I was being selfish, that I was throwing away everything we could have had. I told him we never had anything. The moment I got sick, he disappeared. Didn't call, didn't write, and now that I'm actually dying, he wants to play the hero? No. I sent him away. Some people love you until it costs them something. I'd rather die alone than live with someone who only loves the healthy version of me. Emma felt a surge of anger on Sarah's behalf. She didn't fully understand adult relationships, but she understood abandonment. She understood being left behind. Her parents hadn't chosen to leave her, but they were gone just the same. And somehow, reading about Sarah's loneliness made her own feel less heavy. July 9th, 1986. My niece Rebecca visited today. She's only 10, but she's smart, sharp. She didn't cry when she saw me, just climbed right up on my lap, careful not to hurt me, and asked if I was scared. I told her the truth. I said I used to be, but not anymore. She asked if dying hurts. I said living hurts more sometimes. She understood, or pretended to. She's the only one in my family who doesn't treat me like I'm already a ghost. I gave her one of my paintings, a fox in the snow. She said she'd keep it forever. I believe her. Rebecca. Emma filed that name away. Sarah had family, a niece who cared about her. Where was she now? Did she know what happened to her aunt? Did she know about this cabin? The journal continued through the months. Sarah's entries grew shorter as her body weakened. She wrote about finishing The Girl Who Wasn't Lost, about sealing it in the studio because she wanted it protected, about deciding that whoever found this place would need to find the book too, like a treasure hunt, like fate. December 1st, 1987. I think this is my last entry. My hands barely work anymore. The pain is constant now, but manageable. I've made peace with what's coming. I've said my goodbyes in the ways that matter. This cabin has been my sanctuary, my final gift to myself, and I hope somehow it becomes a gift to someone else. I've left instructions in a sealed letter, placed it with the book. If anyone finds this place, they'll know what to do. I'm not afraid. I'm ready. The snow is falling again, and it's beautiful. Everything is beautiful when you know you're seeing it for the last time. That was the final entry. Emma stared at the blank pages that followed, pages Sarah never got to fill. She closed the journal gently and held it against her chest. Sarah had died here, in this cabin, probably in that bed, alone. But not lonely. Not really. She'd died on her own terms, surrounded by her art, her words, her peace. Emma stood and walked back to the art studio. The morning light filled it now, making the dust motes dance like tiny stars. She saw things she'd missed in the dark last night, more paintings stacked against the walls, sketchbooks filled with practice drawings, jars of brushes, their bristles stiff with age, and on the desk beside the manuscript, a sealed envelope. It was cream-colored, expensive-looking, with one word written on the front in Sarah's graceful handwriting: instructions. Emma's hands trembled as she picked it up. The seal had protected it from dust and time. She carefully opened it and pulled out several folded pages. The letter was typed this time, probably because Sarah's hands had been too weak to write by hand anymore. "To whoever finds this place," it began. "If you're reading this, then you've survived something, a storm, a crisis, a moment when the world tried to break you, and somehow, impossibly, you found your way here, to my cabin, my sanctuary, my final refuge. First, I want you to know that you're safe. Everything in this cabin is yours to use. The food, the warmth, the shelter. I left it all intentionally. This place was meant to be found, just not yet. Not until it was needed. Second, I need you to understand what you've discovered. I was a children's book illustrator named Sarah Mitchell. I was born in Seattle on June 14, 1952. I was diagnosed with a degenerative muscular disease in 1985 and given 2 years to live. I chose to spend that time here in this cabin I built myself, creating one final book. That book, The Girl Who Wasn't Lost, is my legacy. It's the story of a child who finds hope in the darkest moment, who discovers that sometimes being lost is the only way to find what you really need. I finished it in 1987. I wanted to publish it, but my body gave out before I could. This is where you come in. If you're an adult reading this, I need you to contact my family. My niece, Rebecca Mitchell, should be in her 30s now, probably living in Seattle. My literary agent was a woman named Patricia Carmichael at the Sterling Agency in New York. The manuscript is complete. The illustrations are finished. All it needs is someone to bring it into the world. If you're a child reading this, or if there's a child with you, then you're the reason this book exists. You're the girl who wasn't lost. And I need you to be brave one more time. I need you to make sure this story reaches the people who can share it. There's one more thing you should know. This cabin isn't just shelter, it's evidence. Evidence of a trust fund I established before I came here. I set aside money, everything I had, to create a foundation, the Sarah Mitchell Literacy Foundation. It's designed to help children who need books, art supplies, hope. But it can only be activated when my final work is published and verified. The account information is with my attorney, David Chen, at Harbor Law Group in Seattle. The trust is worth approximately $300,000. By now, with interest, it could be much more. I know this is a lot to put on a stranger, especially if that stranger is a child. But I believe in signs. I believe in purpose. And I believe that nothing happens by accident. You found this cabin for a reason. Maybe you needed saving. Maybe this book needed you. Maybe both. Don't be afraid. You're stronger than you know, and you're not alone. Even though I'm gone, I'm with you in these pages, in this story, in this place that kept you safe. With love from across time, Sarah Mitchell. December 1st, 1987. Emma read the letter 3 times, her heart pounding harder with each pass. A foundation, money, a book that needed to be published. And somewhere out there, a woman named Rebecca, who'd once been a 10-year-old girl visiting her dying aunt. This wasn't just a cabin. It was a mission, a responsibility. Sarah had trusted that whoever found this place would care enough to see her final wish fulfilled, and that whoever was Emma, a 7-year-old girl who could barely read cursive, who hadn't spoken more than a few words in 2 years, who was trapped in a snowstorm with no way out. How could she possibly do what Sarah was asking? She looked down at the manuscript again, at the beautiful illustrations of the girl in the snow finding the cabin. The girl who looked like her, who'd been drawn decades before Emma was born, but somehow captured her exact loneliness, her exact fear, her exact hope. And then Emma understood something that made her chest feel tight and warm at the same time. This wasn't about being ready. This wasn't about being old enough or strong enough or capable enough. This was about being the right person at the right time. Sarah had believed, truly believed, that someone would come, that someone would care, that her story wouldn't die with her. Emma had to make sure she was right. She carefully folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. She gathered the manuscript, holding it like the precious thing it was. She walked back to the main room and set everything on the table. Then she did something she hadn't done in 2 years. She spoke. "I'll do it," she whispered to the empty cabin, to Sarah's ghost, to herself. "I promise. I'll make sure they know about you, about the book, about everything." Her voice was rusty, small, barely more than a breath. But it was there. Words, real words. And once she started, she found she couldn't stop. "I don't know how yet. I don't know if anyone's coming. But I'm not giving up. You didn't give up, even when you were dying. So I won't either. I'll get out of here. I'll find Rebecca. I'll make sure your book gets published, I promise." What happens next will change everything for both a lost girl and a forgotten legacy, revealing truths that will shake an entire community and prove that some promises are worth keeping, even across decades. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. The day passed slowly. Emma rationed the canned food, opening a tin of peaches and eating them with a spoon she found in the drawer. They were sweet and syrupy, probably decades old, but they tasted like hope. She kept the fire burning, carefully adding logs to make them last. She read more of Sarah's journal, learning about the woman who'd created this refuge. Sarah had been funny. Her entries weren't all sad and philosophical. Some made Emma laugh, like the one about the raccoon that kept trying to break in through the window, or the entry about burning soup so badly she had to air out the cabin for 3 days. Sarah had been real, fully human. Not some tragic figure, but a woman who'd lived with grace and humor right up until the end. As afternoon light faded, Emma heard something that made her freeze. A sound outside, not the wind, not snow falling from branches, something else, a rhythmic thumping, distant but growing closer. Helicopter. Emma ran to the window, her heart racing. She couldn't see anything through the frosted glass. She ran to the door and pounded on it, screaming with her newfound voice. "I'm here! I'm in here! Help!" The sound grew louder, directly overhead. The whole cabin seemed to vibrate with it. Emma kept screaming, kept pounding, even though she knew they couldn't hear her through the snow and wood. Then, as quickly as it had come, the helicopter sound faded, moving away, searching somewhere else. Emma sank to the floor, tears streaming down her face. "No," she whispered. "No, please, come back." But the silence returned, just wind and the soft crackle of the fire. She cried then, really cried, for the first time since the accident. Great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for her grandmother, for her parents, for Sarah who died alone, for herself trapped in this cabin with a promise she didn't know how to keep. She cried until she had nothing left. Then she wiped her face on her sleeve, stood up, and looked around the cabin. Crying didn't help. Sarah hadn't given up, so neither would she. Emma spent the evening exploring every corner of the cabin more thoroughly. She found more supplies, candles, matches, batteries that were probably dead. She found a hand-crank radio that didn't work. She found blankets and clothes that had belonged to Sarah, adult sizes but warm. In the kitchenette, she found a notebook and a pencil. She sat at the table and carefully wrote out everything she could remember from Sarah's letter. The names: Rebecca Mitchell, Patricia Carmichael, David Chen, Harbour Law Group, Sterling Agency. She wrote it all down in her messy 7-year-old handwriting because she was terrified of forgetting. Then she did something else. She started drawing. Not well, she wasn't an artist like Sarah, but she drew the truck going off the road. She drew her grandmother. She drew herself walking through the snow. She drew the cabin, and she drew what she hoped would happen next: rescue. Night fell. Emma made herself eat more, a can of soup this time, heated carefully over the fire in a pot she found hanging from a hook. It was chicken noodle, the same kind her mother used to make when she was sick. The similarity made her chest ache, but she ate it all. She added more wood to the fire, wrapped herself in blankets, and climbed into Sarah's bed. The mattress was old but comfortable. The blankets smelled like lavender and thyme. Emma held the manuscript close, looking at the illustrations in the firelight. The girl in the drawings really did look like her. Same dark hair, same small frame, same expression of fear mixed with determination. How had Sarah known? How had she drawn a child she'd never met, who wouldn't be born for years after Sarah died? Emma didn't believe in magic. Not really. But lying there in a cabin that had waited 37 years to save her life, holding a book that predicted her arrival, she thought maybe there were things in the world that didn't need explaining. Things that just were. Meant to be. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "Thank you for waiting for me." Outside, the temperature dropped. Inside, the fire burned steady, and in the space between sleep and waking, Emma dreamed. She dreamed of a woman with dark hair and kind eyes, sitting at the desk in the studio, painting a little girl walking through snow. She dreamed of that woman looking up, looking right at her across the years and smiling. "You found it," Dream Sarah said. "I knew you would." "I'm scared," Emma said. "That's okay. Brave people are always scared. They just don't let it stop them." "What if I can't keep my promise? What if nobody finds me?" Sarah's smile grew sadder. "Then you stay here as long as you need. This cabin kept me safe. Now it's keeping you safe. And when you're ready, when you're strong enough, you'll find a way out. You'll tell my story. You'll make sure the book finds the children who need it." "How do you know?" "Because you're the girl who wasn't lost, and that girl always finds her way home." Emma woke with tears on her cheeks and morning light streaming through the windows again. Day 3 in the cabin. She sat up and looked around, half expecting to see Sarah sitting at the table. But she was alone. No, not alone, never alone. The cabin held her. Sarah's words surrounded her, and somewhere out there her grandmother was either waiting or searching or both. Emma got up, rebuilt the fire, and made herself breakfast. Then she did something that surprised her. She went back to the studio, found a blank sketchbook, and started drawing her own story. She couldn't write well enough to make sentences that made sense, but she could draw, she could create. She drew herself in the truck with Marie. She drew the storm. She drew finding the cabin. And on the last page, she drew what she hoped for. Her and her grandmother, safe and warm, with Sarah's book between them. Hours passed. The sun tracked across the sky. Emma ate. She kept the fire going. She read more of the journal. She studied Sarah's paintings, trying to understand how she'd made the watercolors so alive, so real. And then, late in the afternoon of the 3rd day, she heard it again. The helicopter. Closer this time. Much closer. Emma ran to the window. Through a small, clear patch, she saw it. A search and rescue helicopter hovering over the trees, not 100 yards away. She screamed, pounding on the glass. "I'm here! I'm here!" The helicopter moved closer. It was looking. Really looking. Emma's heart hammered so hard it hurt. She grabbed a blanket, ran to the fireplace and threw it on the fire. Smoke billowed, thick and dark. She ran back to the window. The helicopter turned. It was coming toward the cabin. Emma sobbed with relief. They'd seen the smoke. They were coming. Within minutes, she heard new sounds. Voices, shouts, the sound of shovels hitting snow. "Hello? Anyone in there?" "I'm here," Emma screamed, her voice finally strong. "I'm in here, please. Stand back from the door." Emma backed away. For what felt like forever but was probably only minutes, she heard them digging. The door shuddered. Snow fell away from the edges, light appeared in cracks, and then, finally, the door burst open. A man in a rescue uniform stood there, backlit by brilliant white snow, and he looked at Emma like he'd seen a miracle. "We found her," he shouted over his shoulder, then softer, kneeling down. "Emma Kane?" She nodded, unable to speak anymore. "Your grandmother's been looking for you. The whole town's been looking. We've been searching for 3 days. Are you hurt?" Emma shook her head. "How did you survive? How did you find this place?" Emma looked back at the cabin, at the journal on the table, at the manuscript, at Sarah's paintings on the walls. "She saved me," Emma whispered. "Sarah saved me." The rescuer didn't understand, but he would. They all would, because Emma Kane, The 7-year-old girl who hadn't spoken in 2 years had found her voice in a cabin that wasn't supposed to exist. And she had a promise to keep. They wrapped Emma in thermal blankets and carried her through the tunnel they'd dug in the snow. The sunlight outside was blinding after 3 days in the cabin's dim interior. Emma squinted against it, her eyes watering, but she didn't look away. She'd survived. She'd kept her promise to stay alive. The helicopter couldn't land in the deep snow, so they'd brought snowmobiles. A paramedic checked Emma's vitals, his gloved hands gentle but efficient. "You're one tough kid," he said, shining a light in her eyes. "Pupils responsive, no signs of severe frostbite. How'd you stay so warm?" "The cabin," Emma said softly. There was a fireplace, and blankets, and food. The rescue team exchanged glances. The lead rescuer, a man named Tom Bridges, who'd lived in Timber Ridge his whole life, stared back at the cabin with something like disbelief. "I've been hunting these mountains for 40 years, he said. "Never knew this place was here." "Nobody did," another rescuer added. "It's not on any maps, not registered with the county. It's like it doesn't exist." "It exists," Emma said firmly. "And there's something inside, something important. I need to take it with me." Tom hesitated. "Sweetheart, we need to get you to the hospital, get you checked out properly." "Please," Emma's voice cracked. "There's a book and letters. They belong to someone who saved my life. I promised I'd protect them." Something in her eyes must have convinced him. Tom nodded to one of his team. "Marcus, go grab whatever she's talking about. Careful. This place is old. Could be unstable." Emma described where everything was, the manuscript on the table, the journal, the envelope with instructions, the paintings in the studio if they could carry them. Marcus disappeared into the cabin and emerged 10 minutes later with a waterproof rescue bag stuffed carefully with Sarah's belongings. "Got it all," he said, "including some paintings. They're beautiful. Who lived here?" "A woman named Sarah Mitchell," Emma said. "She died a long time ago, 1987. Tom's eyebrows shot up. 37 years ago, and her stuff is still intact? Emma nodded. "She was waiting for someone to find it. She was waiting for me." They loaded Emma onto the back of a snowmobile, the bag with Sarah's things secured beside her. The ride down the mountain was rough, jarring her aching body with every bump and drift. But Emma held onto that bag like it contained her whole future. Because in a way, it did. The hospital in Timber Ridge was small, just 20 beds, and a staff that knew everyone by name. When Emma arrived, the waiting room erupted. Half the town had been there for 3 days, waiting for news, praying, refusing to give up hope. And there, in a wheelchair by the nurses' station, sat Marie Kane. Emma's heart nearly stopped. Her grandmother looked smaller than she remembered, frailer, with her left arm in a sling and bruises darkening her weathered face. But her eyes, those fierce, loving eyes, were bright with tears. "Emma," Marie choked out. "Oh, my baby, my sweet baby." Emma broke free from the paramedic's gentle grip and ran. She threw herself into her grandmother's lap, careful of the injured arm, and buried her face in Marie's shoulder. And then they were both crying, holding each other like they'd never let go, like the world could throw anything at them and they'd face it together. "I'm sorry," Emma sobbed. "I'm sorry I left you. I didn't want to. I had to get help. I had to—" "Shh," Marie stroked her hair. "You did exactly right. You saved both of us, baby. You're a hero." "Are you okay? Your arm—" "Dislocated shoulder, some bruised ribs, nothing that won't heal." Marie pulled back to look at Emma's face, touching her cheeks, her nose, her forehead, like she needed to confirm she was real. "They found me 8 hours after you left. A snowplow driver saw the truck. I told them about you, told them which way you'd gone. They've been searching ever since." Sheriff Mullins approached, hat in hand. He was a big man with a soft voice, the kind who coached Little League and cried at graduations. "Emma, can you tell us what happened? How'd you survive out there?" Emma told them everything. About walking through the storm, about finding the cabin that shouldn't exist, about the fireplace and the food and the blankets, about Sarah Mitchell and her journal and the book and the paintings and the letter with instructions. The adults listened with expressions that shifted from relief to confusion to wonder. "I need to make a phone call," Emma said when she finished, "to Seattle, to find someone named Rebecca Mitchell. She's Sarah's niece. She needs to know about the cabin, about the book, about everything." The sheriff exchanged a look with Marie. "Sweetheart, let's make sure you're healthy first. Then we'll figure out the rest." But Emma shook her head with a stubbornness that surprised everyone, including herself. "No. Sarah waited 37 years. I'm not making her wait any longer. Please, I promised." There was something in her voice, something that had changed during those 3 days alone. The little girl who'd barely spoken for 2 years had found words, purpose, fire. Marie saw it. The sheriff saw it. They all saw it. "Okay," Marie said softly. "We'll help you. I promise." The doctors checked Emma thoroughly. Mild dehydration, early-stage frostbite on 2 toes that would heal completely, some muscle strain, minor cuts and bruises. Miraculously, nothing serious. They wanted to keep her overnight for observation, but Emma refused to let go of the rescue bag with Sarah's things. A nurse finally set up a cot in Marie's room so they could stay together. That night, while Marie slept fitfully in the hospital bed, Emma carefully spread Sarah's manuscript across the wheeled table. She looked at every illustration, read every word she could understand. The story was simple but profound. A girl gets lost in a storm. She finds a cabin. Inside, she discovers she's not alone, that the woman who built the cabin left pieces of herself behind to help, and slowly, through reading the woman's journal and seeing her art, the girl begins to heal. Not from the cold, but from loneliness, from grief, from feeling like she didn't matter. In the final pages, the girl leaves the cabin when spring comes. She carries the woman's story with her and shares it with the world. And because of that, the woman never really dies. She lives on in every child who reads the book, who sees themselves in the girl who wasn't lost. Emma closed the manuscript with trembling hands. Sarah had known. Somehow, impossibly, she'd known that stories don't die when their creators do. That love can reach across decades if you're brave enough to leave it behind for someone to find. The next morning, Marie made the call. She spoke with directory assistants, then Harbor Law Group in Seattle. When she asked for David Chen, there was a long pause. Then a woman's voice said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Chen passed away in 2009. Is there something I can help you with?" Marie explained as best she could. A cabin, a woman named Sarah Mitchell who died in 1987, a trust fund, a manuscript, instructions left for whoever found them. The woman on the other end went quiet, then asked Marie to hold. 5 minutes passed. Then a man's voice came on the line. "This is Robert Vance, senior partner. Did you say Sarah Mitchell?" "Yes," Marie confirmed. "My God," Robert breathed. "David Chen was my mentor. Before he died, he left me a sealed file, said to keep it active indefinitely, said someday someone might call about Sarah Mitchell and a cabin in Montana. I thought he was being sentimental, keeping a file for a client who'd been missing for decades." "She's not missing," Marie said gently. "She passed away, but she left behind something extraordinary, and my granddaughter found it." Within 2 days, things began moving faster than Emma could track. Robert Vance flew to Montana with files that had been sealed since 1987. He sat in Marie's living room, Emma curled beside her grandmother on the couch, and opened Sarah's legal legacy. The trust was real. Sarah had sold her childhood home, her car, everything she owned, and placed it in a specialized trust designed to activate only when specific conditions were met. The publication and verification of her final manuscript, The Girl Who Wasn't Lost. The trust had started at $312,000 in 1987. With conservative investments and compound interest over 37 years, it now sat at just over $2 million. The sole purpose, create the Sarah Mitchell Literacy Foundation to provide books, art supplies and creative writing programs to underprivileged children across the Pacific Northwest. Robert pulled out another document. Sarah also left specific instructions about her family. Her niece Rebecca was to be contacted first. He looked at Emma. She left a letter for Rebecca too, sealed, to be opened only if the cabin and manuscript were found. "Where is she?" Emma asked. "Rebecca?" "Seattle. She's an attorney, actually, works in environmental law. I found her contact information." He hesitated. "Are you sure you want to do this? Once we make contact, once we verify the manuscript, this becomes very real. There'll be media attention, legal processes. Your life will change." Emma looked at the manuscript sitting on the coffee table, Sarah's watercolors glowing even in the dim living room light. It already changed, in that cabin, when I read her words and realized she built it for me, for any lost kid who needed saving. She met Robert's eyes. Sarah trusted someone would care enough to finish what she started. I care, so yes, I'm sure. Robert Vance called Rebecca Mitchell that afternoon. Emma listened as he explained who he was, why he was calling, what had been found. There was a long silence on the other end. Then a woman's voice, shaking, said, "That's impossible. Aunt Sarah disappeared in 1987. We searched for months. We assumed she died in the mountains. You're telling me some little girl just found her cabin, with her last book inside?" "I'm telling you exactly that," Robert said. "And there's a letter here from Sarah, addressed to you, sealed since December 1st, 1987. Another silence. Then, "I'm coming to Montana, tomorrow. I need to see this myself." Rebecca Mitchell arrived in Timber Ridge on a gray Thursday afternoon, 18 days before Christmas. Emma and Marie met her at the small diner on Main Street, the same one where Marie had worked for decades. Rebecca was tall, 47 years old, with dark hair streaked with silver and eyes that looked exactly like Sarah's in the photographs. She walked in carrying a briefcase and wearing the kind of suit that didn't belong in a town like Timber Ridge. But when she saw Emma, something in her expression cracked. She stopped, stared, and her briefcase slipped from her fingers. "You," she whispered. "You look exactly like the girl in the drawings." Emma nodded. "I know." Rebecca sat down heavily, her professional composure dissolving. "I don't understand any of this. How is that possible?" Marie ordered coffee for everyone and hot chocolate for Emma. Then, slowly and carefully, Emma told the story again. The storm, getting lost, finding the cabin, the journal, the manuscript, the letter, Sarah's final wishes. She pulled the manuscript from her backpack and slid it across the table. Rebecca's hands shook as she opened it. She turned pages slowly, tears streaming down her face, her fingers tracing the watercolors that her aunt had created decades ago. "I remember these," she said hoarsely. "She used to paint animals like this when I visited. She'd tell me stories about them, about the wise fox and the brave rabbit and the owl who saw everything." She looked up. She was brilliant. She had 3 published books before she got sick. They weren't bestsellers, but they were beautiful. And then Thomas left her, and her parents couldn't handle watching her die, and she just disappeared. "She didn't disappear," Emma said softly. "She went somewhere she could die with dignity, somewhere she could create one last gift." Rebecca wiped her eyes. "May I see the letter, the one she left for me?" Robert Vance had brought it, still sealed in the cream-colored envelope. Rebecca took it with trembling hands and carefully opened it. The letter inside was typed, just like the instructions Emma had found. "My dearest Rebecca," it began. "If you're reading this, then 2 things are true. First, I've passed away, which was always going to happen, so please don't be too sad. And second, someone found my cabin and my final work, which means miracles are real. I want you to know that leaving the way I did wasn't about running from you or from our family. It was about running toward something, toward peace, toward the chance to die on my own terms, creating instead of deteriorating in a hospital bed. I thought about you every day. You were 10 the last time I saw you, sitting in my lap, asking if dying hurt. You were so brave, so honest. I wanted to watch you grow up. I wanted to see the woman you'd become. But life doesn't always give us what we want. I'm trusting that whoever found this place has already told you about the manuscript and the trust. I need you to do something for me. I need you to make sure The Girl Who Wasn't Lost gets published. Not for royalties or fame, but because there's a child out there, maybe the one reading this letter to you right now, who needs to know they're not alone. That being lost doesn't mean being forgotten. Use the foundation money wisely. Help kids who love stories but can't afford books. Help kids who need art supplies to express what words can't say. Help kids who feel invisible become seen. You were always going to do important things, Rebecca. Even at 10, I could see it. You had fire, purpose. I'm asking you to channel some of that toward this, toward keeping my last dream alive. I love you. I always did. And I'm so proud of the woman I know you've become, even though I'll never get to meet her. Your Aunt Sarah, December 1st, 1987. Rebecca folded the letter carefully, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Emma reached across the table and took her hand, this woman she'd never met, but somehow knew through Sarah's words. I'll help you, Emma said. With the foundation, with the book, with everything. Sarah saved my life. Now I want to help save other kids like me. Rebecca squeezed Emma's hand, managing a watery smile. You're 7 years old. 7 and 3 months, Emma corrected. And I can read and draw. And I know what it feels like to be so sad you forget how to talk. I know what Sarah's cabin gave me. I want to give that to other kids. Marie put her arm around Emma's shoulders, pride shining through her own tears. My granddaughter has a point. Sarah left this for her, for kids like her. Maybe Emma should be part of making it happen. Rebecca stared at Emma for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, but first I need to see the cabin. I need to stand where Aunt Sarah spent her last days. I need to understand how all of this is even possible. The next morning they made the journey. The county had cleared a path to the cabin after Emma's rescue, curious about the structure that had saved a child's life and existed on no official record. Rebecca, Emma, Marie, Robert Vance, and Sheriff Mullins made the trip in a convoy of trucks equipped with chains and emergency supplies. The cabin sat exactly as Emma had left it, preserved and patient. Rebecca stood in the doorway for a full minute, not moving, barely breathing. Then she stepped inside, and Emma watched her face transform. Recognition, grief, love, wonder. She was here, Rebecca whispered, touching the walls, the furniture, the fireplace. This is real. She really did this. Emma led her to the art studio. When Rebecca saw the paintings, the sketches, the desk where Sarah had created her final masterpiece, she broke down completely. She sank to the floor and wept, great heaving sobs that seemed to carry 37 years of unresolved grief. Emma sat beside her, not speaking, just being present. Marie had taught her that sometimes the best comfort is silent companionship. They sat like that for 20 minutes, while Rebecca mourned the aunt she'd lost and found all at once. Finally, Rebecca stood, wiping her eyes. I want to preserve this place, she said. Turn it into something, a museum maybe, or a retreat. Somewhere kids can come and feel what you felt, Emma. Safe, seen, saved. The foundation headquarters, Robert suggested. Sarah's trust could fund the restoration and maintenance, make it the heart of everything the foundation does. Rebecca's eyes lit up. Yes, exactly. We restore the cabin, preserve Sarah's studio, display her original artwork, and we use it as a place where children can come for writing workshops, art classes, storytelling sessions. She looked at Emma. Would you help design the programs? You know what kids need. What would have helped you when you were hurting? Emma thought about the dark months after her parents died, the silence that had wrapped around her like chains, the feeling that nothing would ever matter again. Books, she said finally. Books where kids in the stories survive hard things. Books that don't lie and say everything gets better, but show that you can live through sadness and still find moments of joy. And art supplies so kids can draw what they can't say. and adults who listen without trying to fix everything. Rebecca pulled out a notebook and started writing. Books, art supplies, listening adults, what else? A place that feels safe, Emma continued, the words flowing now. Not like a hospital or a therapy office. Somewhere that feels like this cabin, Rebecca finished. Somewhere that feels like someone prepared it just for you. Emma nodded. Sarah knew I was coming, even though she never met me. The foundation should make every kid feel like that. Like someone was waiting for them. Like they matter. The adults in the room exchanged glances. Marie's eyes were bright with tears again, but these were different. Proud tears. Joyful tears. Sheriff Mullins cleared his throat. I'll talk to the county commission. We can probably get this land designated as a historical site. Protected. The town would support it. Emma's story has already spread. People are calling Timber Ridge the town where miracles happen. Over the next weeks, everything accelerated. Rebecca took a leave of absence from her law firm to focus on Sarah's legacy full-time. Robert Vance worked with publishers, reaching out to Patricia Carmichael's old agency. Patricia had retired, but her successor nearly dropped the phone when she heard the story. A manuscript by Sarah Mitchell, the children's author who'd vanished in the 80s, complete with finished illustrations, and a real-life story of a child who'd been saved by it. We want this, the agent said. Every publisher in New York will want this. They were right. The manuscript went to auction. 8 publishers bid. The winner offered a 6-figure advance with a promise to fast-track publication. Proceeds would be split between the foundation and Emma's family, with the majority going to Sarah's vision. The media found out. Reporters descended on Timber Ridge. Emma's story spread. The 7-year-old girl who survived a blizzard by finding a cabin that had waited 37 years to save her. The book that predicted her arrival. The trust fund designed to help children like her. People called it fate, divine intervention, magic. Emma called it Sarah's love reaching across time. The cabin became a pilgrimage site even before the official foundation launched. Parents brought their children just to see the place. Teachers used Emma's story in their classrooms. Letters poured in from around the country, from kids who'd lost parents, who felt invisible, who needed to know that being lost wasn't forever. Emma read every letter. And she answered them, in her messy 7-year-old handwriting at first, then typed with Marie's help. She told them about Sarah, about the cabin, about how you could be scared and brave at the same time, about how the darkest moments sometimes led to the most important discoveries. One letter came from a girl in Portland who'd stopped speaking after her brother died. She wrote, I thought I'd be quiet forever, but you found your voice in a cabin in the snow. Maybe I can find mine too. Emma wrote back, You will, I promise. And when you do, it'll be even stronger because you had to fight for it. Rebecca watched Emma transform from a traumatized child into an advocate, a voice for kids who'd forgotten how to speak. Sarah would have loved you, she told Emma one afternoon as they sat in the cabin planning the foundation's first programs. I think she did, Emma replied, looking at the painting of the girl in the snow, the one that looked exactly like her. Across time, she loved me before I was born. That's why this all worked. Rebecca followed her gaze. You really believe that this was meant to happen? Emma nodded. My parents died so I could live with Grandma Marie. The storm came so we'd crash. The cabin was there exactly when I needed it. Sarah wrote a book about me 37 years before I existed. She looked at Rebecca. I don't know if that's God or fate or magic or what, but yeah, I believe it was meant to happen. All of it. Even the sad parts? Especially the sad parts, Emma said quietly, because the sad parts are what made me understand what Sarah was trying to say. That being lost is how you find what matters. By spring, the Sarah Mitchell Literacy Foundation was official. The cabin had been carefully restored, Sarah's studio preserved exactly as she'd left it. The main room became a reading space with shelves full of books. The loft was converted into an art classroom. A new building nearby housed offices and a larger meeting space for workshops and programs. The foundation offered free books to any child who wanted them, art supply grants for schools, writing workshops led by published authors. And every summer, a week-long camp at the cabin where kids who'd experienced trauma could come to heal through stories and art. Emma was there for the grand opening, now 8 years old and no longer silent. She stood in front of reporters, cameras, and a crowd that included the governor, and spoke clearly. Sarah Mitchell built a cabin to die in, but really, she built it so someone could live. She built it for me, and now we're building something for every kid who feels lost. Every kid who thinks nobody sees them or cares. We see you, we care, and you're not alone. The crowd applauded, cameras flashed, but Emma wasn't looking at them. She was looking at the cabin, at the window of Sarah's studio, and for just a moment she could have sworn she saw a figure there. Dark hair, kind eyes, a smile. "Thank you," Emma whispered. The figure, if it had ever been there at all, was gone. But Emma felt peace settle over her like a warm blanket. Sarah's work was complete, the book was published, the foundation was real, and a 7-year-old girl who'd been lost in the snow had found her purpose. Rebecca put her hand on Emma's shoulder. "Ready for the tour?" Emma nodded. Together, they walked into the cabin that had changed everything. Inside, children already sat in reading circles, books open, eyes wide with wonder. The girl who wasn't lost was home. And somewhere beyond sight, Sarah Mitchell rested. Her final gift, given freely to a child she'd never met, had bloomed into something extraordinary. Love, it turned out, was the one thing that could outlast death, outlast time, outlast everything. All it needed was someone brave enough to find it and share it with the world. The publication of The Girl Who Wasn't Lost happened on a crisp October morning, exactly 11 months after Emma Kane stumbled into that cabin. The book hit shelves across America with a marketing campaign unlike anything the publishing world had seen. Not because of gimmicks or celebrity endorsements, but because the story behind the story was impossible to ignore. A woman dying of a degenerative disease creates one final book in a cabin she built to die in. 37 years later, a 7-year-old girl, lost in a blizzard after her grandmother's truck crashes, finds that exact cabin. The book inside predicts her arrival with illustrations that look exactly like her, drawn decades before she was born. The girl survives. The book is published. A foundation is born. The media called it the miracle book. The publishing house called it the most important children's book of the decade. But Emma, now 8 years old and standing in a bookstore in Missoula holding the first printed copy, called it something simpler. "It's Sarah's hug," she said to Rebecca, who stood beside her with tears already streaming down her face, "for every kid who needs one." The book was beautiful. The publisher had reproduced Sarah's watercolors with painstaking care, each illustration glowing with the same warmth and detail as the originals. The story was simple enough for young readers, but layered with meaning that adults could appreciate. It told of a girl named Luna who gets separated from her family during a storm. She finds a cottage in the woods built by a woman named Sage, who'd passed away years before. Inside, Luna discovers Sage's journal, her paintings, her story of facing death with grace. And through reading Sage's words, Luna finds the courage to face her own fears, her own grief, her own feeling of being invisible in a world that moves too fast. The final page showed Luna leaving the cottage when spring arrives, carrying Sage's journal with her, sharing the story with other children. The last illustration was Luna, older now, reading to a circle of kids who looked lost, just like she once had. And above them, painted in delicate watercolor, was the faint image of Sage, smiling, finally at peace. Reviews poured in immediately. The New York Times called it a meditation on mortality and hope that speaks to readers of all ages. School Library Journal gave it a starred review, writing, "Sarah Mitchell's final work is a masterpiece of empathy, showing children that grief and joy can coexist, that being lost is sometimes necessary to find your true path." But the review that made Emma cry came from a small blog run by a children's librarian in Ohio. "This book saved my daughter's life," the woman wrote. After losing her father, she stopped speaking, stopped engaging, stopped believing the world had any light left in it. Then we read The Girl Who Wasn't Lost together. On the last page, my daughter looked at me and said her first words in 6 months. I'm Luna, but I'm going to be okay. If you have a child struggling with loss, with fear, with feeling invisible, buy this book. Let Sarah Mitchell's love reach across time and hold them. Emma read that review 3 times, her finger tracing the screen of Marie's old computer. We're doing it, she whispered. Sarah's plan is working. Within 3 months, the book had sold over 200,000 copies. It won the Caldecott Medal for Illustration, accepted posthumously by Rebecca on Sarah's behalf. It won the Newbery Honour. It was translated into 17 languages. And most importantly, it found its way into the hands of children who needed it most. The Foundation used the book proceeds wisely. They established mobile libraries that traveled to rural communities across Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, and Washington. Each library carried 500 books, a third of them copies of The Girl Who Wasn't Lost, given away free to any child who wanted one. They funded art supply grants for underfunded schools, providing everything from crayons to watercolor sets to sketch pads. They hired trauma-informed counselors who could lead workshops combining storytelling and art therapy. And they renovated the cabin, transforming it from a hidden refuge into a beacon of hope. Sarah's Sanctuary, as it was officially named, opened to visitors in the spring of Emma's 9th birthday. The cabin itself remained largely unchanged. Sarah's studio was preserved behind glass, allowing visitors to see where she'd created her final masterpiece. Her paintings hung on the walls, each with a small plaque explaining the story behind it. Her journal, the original, sat in a climate-controlled case, open to the page where she'd written, "I'm not afraid anymore, I'm ready." But the real magic happened in the new building constructed beside the cabin. It was built from the same stone and timber, designed to blend with Sarah's original structure. Inside was a library with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the mountains, reading nooks with cushions and blankets, a soundproof room for kids who needed quiet, an art studio 3 times the size of Sarah's, equipped with easels, paints, clay, and every medium a child could imagine. And in the center of the main room, a bronze statue. It showed a little girl, small and bundled in winter clothes, pushing open a door. The plaque beneath read, "For every lost child who finds their way home. In memory of Sarah Mitchell, 1952 to 1987, and in honor of Emma Kane, who proved that love outlasts everything." Emma hated the statue at first. "I didn't do anything special," she protested to Rebecca. "I just survived." Rebecca knelt down to Emma's eye level. "You did more than survive. You kept a promise. You gave Sarah's voice back to the world. You turned your trauma into purpose. That's not just special, Emma. That's extraordinary." The first summer camp at Sarah's Sanctuary hosted 20 children, ages 7 to 12, all of whom had experienced significant loss. Parents, siblings, homes to fires or floods, stability to poverty or violence. They came from across the Northwest, some traveling 8 or 9 hours to reach the remote Montana mountains. Emma was there for every day of that first camp. She was still just 9 years old, younger than most of the campers, but she wasn't there as a participant. She was there as a guide, someone who'd walked the path they were on and found her way through. On the first night, the children gathered in the main room of the new building, sitting in a circle on cushions. A counselor named Dr. Patricia Reeves, a trauma specialist who'd worked with children for 30 years, led the opening session. "This week isn't about fixing you," Patricia said gently, "because you're not broken. You've been through something hard, something that changed you, and that's okay. We're here to give you tools, stories, art, community, ways to express what words can't always say." A boy named Marcus, 10 years old, raised his hand. "Why here? Why this place?" Emma spoke up. "Because this cabin saved my life. Not just from freezing to death, but from forgetting how to live. The woman who built it, Sarah, she understood that sometimes you need a place that feels separate from the world, where you can be sad without anyone telling you to cheer up, where you can be angry without anyone saying you're being difficult, where you can just be. A girl named Sophia, 8 years old with dark circles under her eyes, asked quietly, "Did it work? Are you okay now?" Emma thought about that. "I'm better," she said honestly. "I still miss my parents every single day. I still have nightmares sometimes. But I also laugh again. I have friends. I found something I love doing, helping other kids like me. So yeah, I'm okay. Not the same as before, but okay in a new way." Throughout the week, the children rotated through different activities. Morning writing sessions where they could journal about anything, their feelings, their memories, or make up stories about magical creatures. Afternoon art sessions where they painted, sculpted, and created without judgment. Evening story circles where they read books together, including The Girl Who Wasn't Lost, and talked about what they meant. On the third day, Emma led a group of 6 kids to the original cabin. They sat in Sarah's studio, smaller and more intimate than the new building, surrounded by her paintings. "Sarah was dying when she made these," Emma said, gesturing to the watercolors of forest animals. "She was in pain. She was scared sometimes, but she chose to create beauty anyway. She chose to leave something behind that would help people she'd never meet." Marcus traced his finger along the glass protecting one of the paintings, a fox sitting in snow, looking back over its shoulder. "My dad used to paint," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. "He died last year. Car accident. I have some of his paintings, but I don't look at them. It hurts too much." Emma nodded. "I know. I couldn't look at pictures of my parents for a long time either. But then I realized something. The hurt comes whether you look or not. At least if you look, you also get to remember the good parts, the way they smiled, the things they loved, the proof that they were here and they mattered." Marcus wiped his eyes. Did Sarah matter, even though she died alone? "She mattered so much," Emma said firmly. "She matters to me. She matters to every kid who reads her book. She matters to everyone who comes to this sanctuary and feels safe. She died alone, but she didn't die forgotten. And that's what she wanted, to be remembered for what she created, not how she ended." By the end of the week, something had shifted in all 20 children. They weren't fixed. Healing doesn't work like that. But they were lighter, more open. Several of them exchanged addresses, promising to write. Sophia, the quiet 8-year-old, had filled an entire sketchbook with drawings of the cabin, the mountains, the stars at night. On the last evening, each child placed a stone in a growing cairn outside the sanctuary. The tradition, started by Patricia, was simple. Leave something of your old pain here. Carry forward something new. Emma placed her stone last, even though this wasn't her first time. She'd placed one after that first camp, and she'd place one after every camp to come. "I leave behind the fear that I'm not enough," she said. "I carry forward the certainty that I was meant to find Sarah, meant to share her story, meant to be here." The children clapped, their small hands making a sound like rain on the roof, and somewhere in the mountains the wind whispered through the pines, carrying their voices up to the stars. The years passed. Emma grew from 9 to 10 to 11 to 12. The foundation grew with her. By the third year, they'd distributed over 50,000 free books to children across the Northwest. They'd funded art programs in 73 schools. They'd hosted 12 summer camps, each one filled to capacity with waiting lists that broke Rebecca's heart. The cabin became famous, featured in magazines and documentaries. The History Channel did a special about Sarah Mitchell, tracking down people who'd known her before her illness. Her former neighbors in Seattle, her college professors, the editor who'd published her first 3 books. They all told the same story. Sarah had been brilliant, kind, fiercely independent, someone who saw the world through an artist's eyes. One interview stood out. It was with Thomas Carver, the man who'd been engaged to Sarah before her diagnosis. He was in his 70s now, grey and weathered, and he cried throughout the entire interview. "I made the worst mistake of my life when I left her," he said. "I was young and scared and selfish. I thought I was protecting myself from watching her die. but all I did was throw away my chance to love someone extraordinary." He looked directly into the camera. "Sarah, if somehow you can hear this, I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry. And I'm grateful that even after everything, you still created something beautiful. You were always better than I deserved." Emma watched that interview with Rebecca in the Foundation's office. When it ended, Rebecca turned off the screen and sat in silence. "Do you think she forgave him?" Emma asked. Rebecca considered it. "I think she let go of him. That's different than forgiveness, maybe better. She didn't waste her final years being angry. She built something new." Emma, now 12 years old and startlingly wise, nodded. "That's what we should all do, right? Build something new from the broken pieces." "Exactly," Rebecca said. She looked at Emma with something like wonder. "You know, when I first got the call about the cabin, I thought this was about closure, about finally knowing what happened to Aunt Sarah, but it's become so much more than that." "What has it become?" Emma asked. "Purpose," Rebecca said simply. "I was a good environmental lawyer. I helped protect forests and rivers, important work. But this, helping kids heal through stories and art, making sure Sarah's final dream came true, this is what I was meant to do." Rebecca had indeed left her law firm permanently. She now ran the foundation full-time, splitting her time between Seattle and Timber Ridge. She'd bought a small house near Marie and Emma, a place where she could escape the city and remember what mattered. She and Emma had become impossibly close, not quite grandmother and granddaughter, but something equally powerful. Two people connected by a woman they'd both loved across time. Marie, now 73 years old, had also transformed. The accident had left her with permanent shoulder pain and a slight limp, but it had given her something too, purpose renewed. She volunteered at the sanctuary 3 days a week, baking cookies for the camps, organizing the library, and listening to children who needed an adult who wouldn't judge. One afternoon, she sat with a girl named Jasmine who'd lost her mother to cancer. Jasmine was 11, angry at the world, refusing to participate in any of the activities. "I don't want to paint," Jasmine said. "I don't want to write. I don't want to feel better." Marie nodded. "Okay, you don't have to do any of that, but can I tell you a story?" Jasmine shrugged. Marie told her about Emma, about the accident that nearly killed them both, about watching her granddaughter walk into a blizzard because there was no other choice, about 3 days of not knowing if Emma was alive, of praying to a God she wasn't sure listened, of the moment the rescue team called to say they'd found her. "I thought I'd lost everything," Marie said. "My son and daughter-in-law were already gone. If Emma had died too, I don't know how I would have survived it. But she didn't die. She found a cabin that had been waiting 37 years to save her. And from that impossible thing, all this grew." She gestured around the sanctuary. "So I guess what I'm saying is this. The worst things in life can lead to the most important things. Not because the bad stuff was good, it wasn't, it was terrible, but because we chose what to do with the pain." Jasmine's tough exterior cracked slightly. What did Emma choose? She chose to help other kids who hurt like she did. She chose to keep a promise to a woman she never met. She chose to believe her story mattered. Marie touched Jasmine's hand gently. "What do you want to choose?" Jasmine was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, "I want my mum back." "I know, sweetheart, I know. But I can't have that." "No," Marie said honestly, "you can't." "So what do I do?" Marie smiled sadly. "You find something to carry forward, something your mum gave you, her humor, her strength, her love of books or music or whatever it was, and you let that be what survives. Not the cancer, not the loss, her." Jasmine cried then, deep sobbing tears that she'd been holding back for months. Marie held her, this strange child who'd wandered into their sanctuary carrying unbearable grief, and let her break apart. Because sometimes breaking apart is the first step toward healing. By the time Jasmine left camp a week later, she'd filled a journal with letters to her mother. Things she wanted to say, memories she wanted to preserve, dreams she'd had where they talked again. Patricia assured her mother that Jasmine had turned a corner, that the work would continue, but something had shifted. Emma received a letter from Jasmine 3 months later. "I'm writing again," it said. "Real writing, not just journals. I'm writing a story about a girl whose mum becomes a star so she can watch over her forever. I don't know if it's good, but it feels important. Thank you for showing me that sad kids can still create beautiful things. Love, Jasmine." Emma pinned that letter to her bedroom wall alongside dozens of others. Children thanking her, thanking Sarah, thanking the sanctuary. Each letter was proof that Sarah's love was still spreading, still reaching kids who needed it. The foundation's impact grew beyond what anyone had imagined. A teacher in Spokane used The Girl Who Wasn't Lost to help her students process a classmate's death. A therapist in Boise kept copies in her waiting room, giving them to families dealing with trauma. A librarian in rural Wyoming started a monthly story circle based on the book, creating community for isolated children. And the requests kept coming. Could the foundation expand to other states? Could they create more sanctuaries? Could they train teachers and counselors in their methods? Rebecca and Emma sat together one evening in Sarah's original cabin, now 5 years after Emma's initial discovery. Emma was 13 now, gangly and bright, already taller than Marie. Rebecca was 52, silver threading through her dark hair, laugh lines deep around her eyes. "We could expand," Rebecca said. "The fund is healthy. Book sales continue. Donations have been generous. We could open a second location in Washington, maybe eventually Oregon." Emma ran her hand along Sarah's desk, the same desk where the manuscript had waited for 37 years. "Is that what Sarah would want?" Rebecca smiled. "I've been asking myself that question for 5 years. What would Sarah want? And I think the answer is simple. She'd want us to reach as many kids as possible without losing what makes this place special." "The intimacy," Emma said. "The feeling that it was made just for you." "Exactly. So we expand slowly, carefully. We don't franchise Sarah's sanctuary into some corporate program. We grow it organically, finding places that need it, people who understand the mission, kids who need safety." Emma nodded. "One more thing. We have to make sure every sanctuary has the book, the real book, Sarah's original manuscript, not just copies, the actual pages she touched." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "That's our only copy. The publisher has the illustrations, but the manuscript itself—" "I know," Emma interrupted, "but that's what makes it sacred. Sarah poured her dying energy into those pages. They carry something more than just words. Every sanctuary should have something Sarah actually created. So we share the manuscript, rotate it between locations, let every lost kid touch the same pages Sarah touched when she was creating their story." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "You understand her better than anyone, you know that?" Emma shrugged. "She understood me first. 37 years before I was born, she saw me. She knew I'd need saving. That's not something you repay. It's something you pass forward." By Emma's 15th birthday, the foundation had opened 3 locations. The original sanctuary in Montana, a second in the Cascade Mountains of Washington, a third in rural Oregon near the coast, each one unique, each one intimate, each one carrying Sarah's spirit. Emma visited all of them regularly, even as she started high school. She'd become something unexpected, a voice for grieving children, a bridge between trauma and hope, a living reminder that the darkest moments can lead to the brightest purpose. She spoke at schools, libraries, and conferences. She never sugarcoated the pain, never pretended that reading a book or painting a picture would fix everything. But she testified again and again that creating something from your pain gave it meaning, that sharing your story helped others feel less alone, that being lost wasn't an ending, it was often a beginning. One speech, delivered at a children's literacy conference when she was 16, went viral. Emma stood on a stage in front of hundreds of educators and spoke without notes. "People ask me if I'm special," she began. "If there was something unique about me that made Sarah's cabin appear, that made me survive, that made all this happen. And the answer is no, I'm not special. I was just a sad 7-year-old kid who missed her parents and couldn't figure out how to live in a world without them." What's special is Sarah. A woman dying of a horrible disease who chose to spend her final energy creating a gift for children she'd never meet. Who built a cabin that would keep someone safe decades after she died. Who truly believed, that stories could save lives. And she was right. Her story saved mine. Not just from freezing to death in the snow, but from disappearing into grief so deep I forgot how to speak. Her words reminded me that I mattered, that my pain mattered, that what I did with that pain could matter to others. So when people call the cabin a miracle, I say no. The miracle was Sarah's love. The miracle is that love doesn't die. It transforms. It waits. And when the right person finds it, it blooms again. The audience gave her a standing ovation. But Emma wasn't looking at them. She was looking at Rebecca in the front row, tears streaming down her face, mouthing 2 words. Thank you. After the speech, a publisher approached Emma. Have you ever considered writing your own book, your story in your words? Emma considered it. Maybe someday. But right now, I'm still living it, still figuring out what it means. Ask me again in 10 years. The years continued to pass. Emma graduated high school at 17, near the top of her class. She'd been accepted to several prestigious universities, but she chose a small college in Montana, close to home, close to the sanctuary, close to everything that mattered. She majored in child psychology with a minor in creative writing. She spent summers working at all 3 sanctuaries, leading workshops, mentoring teenage counselors, and continuing to write letters to every child who reached out. Marie, now 80 years old, finally retired from volunteering. Her body couldn't handle the mountain winters anymore, but she lived in a comfortable house that the foundation had helped purchase, with Emma visiting daily, with Rebecca stopping by weekly, with a community that loved her. On quiet evenings, Marie would sit with Emma and they'd talk about the accident, about the truck going off the road, about the decision to send Emma into the storm. Do you regret it? Emma asked once. Sending me out there? Marie shook her head. I hated it. Every second you were gone, I hated myself for it. But I'd do it again because staying in that truck meant we both would have died. At least this way you had a chance. She paused. I just never imagined your chance would lead to all this. Neither did I, Emma admitted. I just wanted to survive. I didn't know I was walking into my purpose. That's how purpose works, Marie said wisely. It finds you when you're not looking, when you're just trying to take the next breath, the next step, and then suddenly you look back and realize every step led exactly where it needed to. Rebecca, now in her late 50s, had also found peace. She'd never married, never had children of her own, but she didn't feel the absence anymore. Emma was her family. The foundation was her child. And Sarah, her beloved aunt who died alone in the mountains, was no longer lost. She lived in every book distributed, every child helped, every sanctuary built in her name. One winter morning, 20 years after Emma first found the cabin, Rebecca and Emma made a pilgrimage together, just the 2 of them. They drove up the mountain road, now paved and maintained by the county. They hiked the final quarter-mile through snow, their boots crunching on the frozen trail. The original cabin stood exactly as it had, preserved perfectly, a living museum to Sarah's final days. They let themselves in with the key that Emma still carried, the same key that had opened the studio door 20 years ago. Inside, everything was pristine. Tour groups came through regularly during summer, but in winter, the cabin was closed to everyone except foundation staff. It was silent, sacred, frozen in time. Emma walked to the studio and stood in front of the painting that had started everything. The fox in the snow, looking back over its shoulder. The one Marcus had loved during that first camp. The one Rebecca had been given as a child. I've been thinking, Emma said, about writing that book, the one the publisher asked about when I was 16. Rebecca turned. Your story? Our story, Emma corrected. Mine, Sarah's, yours. The foundations, all of it. Not a children's book, an adult book. Something that explores grief, purpose, coincidence, faith. All the big questions this journey raised. What would you call it? Rebecca asked. Emma smiled. The Cabin That Waited, About how love can survive death, time, distance. About how one woman's final act of creation saved a child and sparked a movement. About how being lost is sometimes the only way to find your truth. Rebecca's eyes shimmered. Sarah would love that title. They sat together in the studio, surrounded by Sarah's paintings, and talked about the book Emma would write, about the lives they'd touched, about the children who'd found hope in these mountains, about Marie, now in her 80s, who'd sent a 7-year-old into a blizzard and saved her life, about purpose found in pain, about legacy built from loss. As the sun began to set, painting the studio in shades of gold and rose, Emma felt something shift. A presence, warm and gentle. She looked at Rebecca, who'd gone very still. "Do you feel that?" Emma whispered. Rebecca nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "She's here. Aunt Sarah, I can feel her." They sat in that feeling, not speaking, barely breathing. And in the silence, Emma understood something she'd always known but never articulated. Sarah hadn't just saved her from the storm. Sarah had given her a reason to survive it, had shown her that pain could be transformed into purpose, that grief could become grace, that the worst moments of your life could lead to the best work you'd ever do. "Thank you," Emma said aloud, to Sarah, to Rebecca, to the universe that had conspired to put a 7-year-old girl in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. "Thank you for waiting for me." The presence faded like a breath released, but its warmth remained. Emma and Rebecca left the cabin as night fell. They stood outside, looking up at the stars, the same stars Sarah had painted, the same stars that had watched over a dying woman and a lost child, and the miracle that connected them. "She's proud of us," Rebecca said. "I know she is." Emma took her hand. "We're proud of her. That's what matters." They drove back down the mountain in comfortable silence. Behind them, the cabin stood watch as it had for nearly 4 decades, waiting, protecting, loving. And somewhere in the space between Earth and stars, Sarah Mitchell smiled. The foundation continued to grow. By its 25th anniversary, it had opened 12 sanctuaries across 7 states. It had distributed over 2 million books. It had provided art supplies to thousands of schools. It had hosted hundreds of camps where broken children learned to create beauty from their pain. Emma, now 32 years old with a PhD in child psychology, ran the foundation alongside Rebecca. She'd written 3 books: The Cabin That Waited, which became a national bestseller, Letters from Lost Children, a collection of correspondence between Emma and the kids she'd helped, and Sarah's Legacy, a comprehensive study of how art and storytelling aid trauma recovery in children. She'd never married, though she'd had relationships. Her life was too full for traditional family structures, she thought. She had the foundation. She had Rebecca. She had Marie, still alive at 93, sharp as ever, living in a care facility where Emma visited her daily. And she had the thousands of children whose lives she'd touched, who wrote to her, who came back to volunteer, who carried Sarah's story forward into their own lives. One of those children was Jasmine, the angry 11-year-old who'd lost her mother to cancer. She was now 36 years old, a published author of middle-grade fiction and a fierce advocate for bereaved children. Her books dealt honestly with death, with loss, with the messy reality of grief. And every dedication page read the same. For Sarah Mitchell, who showed us that love outlasts everything, and for Emma Kane, who proved it. Marcus, the boy who'd connected with the fox painting, became an art therapist. He worked at the Washington Sanctuary, teaching children to express through color and line what words couldn't capture. He kept a copy of Sarah's fox in his office, a reminder that beauty could exist alongside pain. Sophia, the quiet 8-year-old who'd filled a sketchbook with drawings of the cabin, became an illustrator. She'd illustrated 7 children's books, each one dealing with themes of loss, hope, and resilience. Her style was unmistakably influenced by Sarah's watercolors, soft and warm and deeply human. The ripples spread farther than Emma could track. A child who attended camp in 2015 became a social worker. Another became a pediatric oncologist who kept copies of The Girl Who Wasn't Lost in her waiting room. Another started a grief support group for teens in her community, modeling it after the sanctuary's approach. Sarah's love, poured into one manuscript 37 years ago, had multiplied beyond measure. On the 40th anniversary of Sarah's death, the Foundation organized a special commemoration. December 1st, 2027. Hundreds of people gathered at the original sanctuary, so many they had to set up heated tents outside. Former campers, now adults, shared stories. Teachers who'd used the book in their classrooms spoke about its impact. Rebecca, now 71 and preparing to retire, gave a speech about her aunt's final gift. And Emma, grey threading through her dark hair, stood in front of the crowd and read from Sarah's journal one last time. "I'm not afraid anymore. I'm ready. The snow is falling again, and it's beautiful. Everything is beautiful when you know you're seeing it for the last time. If anyone ever finds this place, I hope they understand what I was trying to do. Not run from death, but run toward meaning. Not hide from the world, but create something the world needed. I built this cabin to die in. But really, I built it so someone could live. And that makes all the difference." Emma closed the journal carefully. "Sarah built a cabin for me 40 years before I was born. She painted my portrait without ever meeting me. She wrote my story before I lived it. People call that a miracle. I call it love. The kind of love that doesn't need to see someone to believe in them. The kind that trusts the universe will bring the right person at the right time. The kind that survives everything, even death. Sarah died alone in that cabin 40 years ago today. But she wasn't forgotten. She isn't forgotten. Every child who finds hope in her story, every adult who learns that purpose can grow from pain, every person standing here today, we're all proof that love is stronger than time, stronger than loss, stronger than anything that tries to diminish it. So Sarah, wherever you are, whatever happens after we die, I want you to know, your cabin is still saving lives. Your book is still healing hearts. Your love is still reaching across the years to hold children who need it. You weren't lost. You were exactly where you needed to be, doing exactly what needed to be done, and we'll make sure you're never forgotten." The crowd stood in silence for a long moment. Then, spontaneously, they began to applaud. It started soft and grew louder, rolling across the mountain like thunder, like gratitude, like love returned. That evening, after everyone had left, Emma made one final trip to the cabin. Just her. She let herself in, lit a fire in the fireplace, and sat in Sarah's chair. She pulled out a notebook and began to write. Not for publication, not for anyone else. Just for herself. And for Sarah. "Dear Sarah, it's been 40 years since you died. 25 since I found your cabin. A lifetime since you built it, knowing you'd never see its purpose fulfilled. I'm 47 now, older than you ever got to be. My hair is turning grey, my knees ache in the cold. I'm becoming the age you never reached, and it feels both like a gift and a theft. I get to grow old. You didn't. That seems deeply unfair. But I want you to know what your cabin, your book, your love has created. Over 2 million children have read your story. 12 sanctuaries bear your name. Thousands of kids have learned to transform their pain into art, their grief into grace. You saved my life when I was 7, and through me, you've saved countless others. I don't know if you can hear this. I don't know if consciousness survives death, if you're somewhere watching, if any of that is real. But I choose to believe you know. I choose to believe that somehow, across whatever separates life from death, you can feel the impact you've had. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for believing someone would come. Thank you for loving me before you knew me. Thank you for showing me that the darkest moments can lead to the brightest purpose. I'll keep your promise. I'll keep spreading your story. And when my time comes, when I'm the one facing death, I hope I can do it with half the grace you showed. I hope I can leave behind something that outlasts me, something that helps someone I'll never meet. You weren't lost, Sarah. You were exactly where you needed to be, with all my love across time, Emma." She closed the notebook and sat in the firelight. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and silent, covering the mountain in white. Emma watched it through the window, remembering another snowstorm, another night, Another version of herself who stumbled through a blizzard and found salvation. She was that girl still, would always be that girl. The girl who wasn't lost. The girl who found a cabin that had been waiting 40 years to save her life. The girl who turned her rescue into a mission, her survival into service, her pain into purpose. And somewhere in the quiet, she felt it again. Sarah's presence, warm and gentle, proud and peaceful, a whisper in the walls, a comfort in the silence. "You did good, Emma," the cabin seemed to say. "You kept your promise. You gave my story to the world. You proved that love survives. You did so good." Emma smiled through tears. "We did good, Sarah, together." She added one more log to the fire, wrapped herself in one of the old wool blankets, and closed her eyes. Tomorrow she'd return to the foundation, to the work, to the children who needed her. But tonight, she'd rest here, in the cabin that saved her, in the space Sarah had created, in the proof that some promises are worth keeping, some love is worth waiting for, and some stories are meant to echo across generations. Because Emma Kane wasn't just the girl who survived the storm. She was the woman who proved that being lost is sometimes the only way to find what you're meant to do. That the worst moments can lead to the best work. That love, true love, never dies. It just waits for the right person to find it and carry it forward. And she'd carried it far. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories are waiting for you. Click to keep discovering, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe that nothing is truly lost, only waiting to serve its purpose.